What's up? This is Kish Yardy Gaming Nation in the building, or Kish Yardy Views and Vlogs in the building. I'm here to review this interview done by Coach Greg Adams and Andrew Wilson. Now, I'm a little bit biased to Coach Greg Adams, but still there's certain things that Coach Greg Adams say that I disagree with, right? But I still fuck with Coach, right? I look at him like I look at Angry Man or Tommy Sotomayor. They're the OGs in this YouTube space, right? Some things I agree with Coach Greg Adams, and I'm going to address them in this video. But I also try to listen to both sides objectively, right? When it comes to Andrew Wilson, because I understand what Andrew Wilson is trying to do. He's trying to bring it back to the Victorian era style of things, right? But he's flawed in what he's thinking, right? But I'm going to try to review this video objectively to see if he's right or wrong, or Coach is right or wrong, or where some areas they might need to improve on and whatsoever needs to be done. Now, remember, like, share, subscribe to the video, right? Because I'm going to be blazing this month in November with a whole bunch of content, you know what I'm saying, that I think is necessary for what's going on in these times. Right. So I got a lot of heads to bash in. I gotta bang on the Democrats, and I gotta bang on the conservatives or the Republicans. Mainly the conservatives and liberals, right? So I'm gonna be pushing our content again, talking about those things. But anyway, let's get to the video.
Okay, go ahead and explain.
Okay, yeah,
Make it work.
I just did. So a few things there that you haven't covered. One, it depends on demographic too. For instance, if you're black, well, that's
I just want to say this: like, when I recognize a lot of those people on the right, like Steven Crowder or Charlie Kirk or even Andrew Wilson, if you go look up, I think this FBI guy, right? He did a whole interview with Vlad, and he was talking about how he infiltrated a lot of those right-wing groups, and how a lot of those right-wing groups tend to be terrorist organizations. I might do a review on that video next, right? And he talked about how a lot of conservatives, there are a lot of conservatives on the right that do a lot of dangerous shit. So it seems to me like, and they push a lot of like extremist stuff. So it seems to me like on those conservative parties on that right, now I'm not putting this on Donald Trump because I voted for Donald Trump. I'm more putting it on Donald Trump to clean up his party a whole lot, right? Just like liberals need to clean up their party a whole lot, right? I'm a balanced classical liberal, which means that I call out both sides, right? I'm in the middle ground, which I think is lacking a lot in our society. But I think with Andrew Wilson and a lot of guys that speak similar to him, especially in the white manosphere, the fact that you got to have a white manosphere and a black manosphere. But anyway, with the white manosphere, a lot of them are extreme right. And a lot of them come from a lot of those extremist conservative groups that are there, right? Just like you can point out, there's a lot of extremist liberal groups. There's a lot of extremist far right groups. So I just want to put that out there because a lot of what Andrew Wilson proposes is a lot. It sounds too similar to what I've heard from the extreme right. But anyway, let's continue with the debate.
it doesn't seem like you actually have anything to do that other than just avoid the thing that's great for you, because this other bad side effect could happen.
Sure, that's like smoking cigarettes.
So why don't we attack the bad side effect when we have the mechanism to do it? It's not if, we can do it now.
Like, what was the Coach Greg's in the suit?
That's how I'm going to see my notes.
Opportunities for women to use the courts against men.
That's how I'm going to see my notes.
Okay, cool. Let's get this thing going. I'll kick it off. You guys ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, guys, finally getting started. Thanks for being patient. I know there was some delays. We got Andrew here versus Coach Greg Adams, aka the Free Agent Lifestyle. We're going to talk about today, is marriage worth it for men in the West? So let's get into some opening statements. Who wants to start off?
Yeah, man, marriage is a great institution. It was an institution that built the community of America. Most of the better communities that have safety, good children, good schools.
I agree.
Are typically centered around marriage. However, marriage has not progressed to the point where men could be safe legally, and a lot of men have experienced tremendous damage, collateral damage as a result, and it has led to broken families, a lot of broken hearts, simply because the laws are not positioned to benefit both people in a divorce.
Now, see, well, Coach Greg Adams is correct, but a lot of the marriage that in the past was centered around men, right? If you hear a lot of the modern women, they're talking about decentering of men, because a lot of the laws, a lot of the patriarchal laws in America, that really benefited more white men than it did really black men. I just want to put that out there. A lot of those laws and marriages are centered around protection of men. Protection, because you look at the language of the rules of patriarchy is the line from the father. So it was to protect the male best interests and his progeny or his children, which a lot of marriage today is not centered around male protection. It's centered around feminism and gynocentry, right? Which is what the issue that Coach Greg Adams tells you if you watch his channel, right?
Therefore, you have no-fault divorce. You have opportunities for women to use the courts against men. And as a result, men have seen 1, 2, and 3 generations of men getting harmed, their grandfathers, their fathers, their uncles, their brothers getting harmed by this. So Generation Z men are not positioning themselves for a positive marriage. So at this particular point, if someone asked me, would I recommend marriage for them, and they were in a certain position in life, they weren't established, I would say no. There's no benefit for the person to get married.
I wouldn't even recommend marriage for men who are established like that. Unless you're an established man, and I don't even recommend that. Let's go. And there's a reason for that. So after I review the debate, I'm going to do a presentation that talks about this. And I'm going to go into my bag and my talking points and what my assessment of this video and critique. I'm going to critique
your response, Andrew.
Coach, but I'm going to be more critiquing Andrew Wilson, because there's a lot of flaws in Andrew Wilson in this debate.
Yeah, I didn't hear any anti-marriage arguments. I heard anti-divorce arguments. So,
and this is my problem with Andrew Wilson. You cannot get to the divorce without entering the marriage, right? Let me put my face up here. Andrew Wilson. That was smart, but not smart. You cannot get to the divorce part without the marriage. And the problem that I'm going to address in my presentation is the marriage. The marriage doesn't just happen. There's a process you have to go through before you get to the marriage. And the problem is the entry to get into the marriage. How men and women interact with each other during the dating phase, the vetting phase, up into the marriage, even before I take that woman on a date. And I'm going to address that in the presentation. But you cannot have a divorce without the marriage. That's like having a credit without a debt system. Debt and credit have to exist for them to exist. Credit cannot exist without debt. Debt cannot exist without credit. Divorce cannot exist without marriage. Marriage cannot exist without divorce, because marriage is the beginning, divorce is the end. I should say that properly. You can't have a divorce without the marriage, because the marriage is the beginning, the divorce is the end. And if you're getting into the marriage already from a fucked up position as a man, and I'm going to explain that, and then in the intermix of the marriage, right, things are going on that leads to the divorce. What are you talking about, Andrew Wilson? Let's go.
I'm with you on divorce, 100%.
Stream over.
And
Yeah, so
but,
agree.
but it's a good thing
if you agree with Greg, if you agree, the stream is over. Let's hear him.
topic isn't on divorce, it's on marriage. And it seems like you agree with my proposition then. And the proposition is that marriage, quote, is a great institution.
Yep.
And that right now your concern is that men can't be safe in marriage, but that's not actually what you're saying. You're not saying men can't be safe in marriage. They can. You're saying that they may not be safe in divorce. So I have a counter proposition for you. My counter proposition.
In order for them to get divorced, they was not safe in the mix of the marriage, in the middle stage of the marriage.
Is what if it's the case that you can use religious marriage institutions without the state? And then we add the ecclesiastical
That's impossible.
Structure of the marriage. That's what always kept them together anyway, before the state was ever involved. So what if instead we use the ecclesiastical church, the structure of the old churches? That would be Catholicism and Orthodoxy, where you see the lowest divorce rates, because the community puts pressure on the women to act right. That's what they do. Right now, the state applies no pressure on women to act right, right? You can just go and file whatever you want, get a divorce, and go be banging the neighbor by the next night. We totally agree on that. But to say that we should abandon marriage is silly. It seems like you're completely pro-marriage. You're just anti-divorce. So why wouldn't you just throw your weight behind institutions where the divorce rate is the least, and you have an ecclesiastical structure which can be appealed to assist with that? That's what makes no sense to me.
My response to that is if we're fifths, we beat all drunk. All right. So that's a scenario that just isn't present.
Can you explain the analogy for me?
Well, if we use if, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If we say if we have a situation where this is present, then this would work. Well, that makes sense. If we had that,
we do have it right now.
Well, it doesn't necessarily work because, and I'm going to tell you why, because a woman can go to a divorce attorney and they can simply just say, hey, listen, it was a off the cuff, off the state divorce, but you got married within a certain state, or she filed in a certain state, so therefore the divorce goes on.
No,
absolutely,
okay.
yes. Listen, I've been to with the divorce attorneys, and what they'll tell you is, hey, listen, you can get married in a ritual, you can get married in the orthodoxy, you can get married off record, but if she files and that woman is hell bent on saying we got married, I don't care if it was a ceremony where we walked on,
which means that regardless if you do it the common law way, according to Andrew Tate, the woman can take you to court and make it the state's business.
Coals with our feet bare.
I wonder if I said that
considered a marriage.
Probably in case I said it wrong. In other words, if you try to do it the common law way, which is the ecclesiastical version of the Bible, the woman can make it the state's business by taking you to court. The woman can do this. And according to Coach Greg Adams, the divorce attorneys, they could do that. And we might do a chat GBT thing on that to see if what he said was correct.
You also have common law. You have a lot of other ways for that woman to establish marriage.
How does your way eliminate common law?
I don't have any way to eliminate common law. So what I have is a way for men to avoid
then the
being
argument's
used.
silly.
No, the argument's not silly. So here's what you have. You have a if proposition, which doesn't exist for most men. Most men aren't religious. Most men aren't looking to be under a religious orthodoxy. So it doesn't apply. So you're taking a moral stand.
My thing is with that is, why would men trade the state being in their business for some church to be in their business? The idea about patriarchy is, or the constitutional republic is, for each man to have his own individual rights and freedoms. I don't know why men must change from the state back being in my business to the church being in my business.
Standard or a religious standard to apply to people who aren't under that veil.
So let's start with a couple of things you said which are fundamentally untrue. Most men are religious, in fact, including in this country. Most of them, not some of them.
But they're not religious.
Hang on. I didn't interrupt.
I understand, but let me just take that point. Most aren't under your religion.
Okay.
We can agree with that.
So here's the thing, though.
He is true. Most men are religious. They're just not under the religion that one Andrew Wilson is proposing. And you got so many different religions. You got Protestant, you got Catholic, you got Judaism, you got Methodist, you got Baptist, you got evangelists, you got so many different religions. Seventh-day Adventists. So many different religions that men follow, and different ways about how they go things. So, like, and even in those religions, men still don't like the church being in their business too much. Shit, hell, men barely like donating their money to some of them churches,
But
especially black
Catholicism and
men.
Orthodoxy is growing
And most black men have left the church. It's mainly women in the church now.
rapidly. And if it's the case that the ecclesiastical structure is already there, which it is, right? If you're going to cohabitate with a woman, the thing that you're offering right now is common law marriage anyway, if there's cohabitation at all. You're not protecting anybody from that. At least under my model, it gives an ecclesiastical structure.
Even in common law marriage, right? You can become the legal father even if the kid is not biologically yours. I forgot what the law was called, where you become the legal father. Even though you was cohabitating on the common law rules, the state, she could go to the state and still put you and still get child support from you. And the state would determine that common law act as legal father.
That's designed to prevent divorce by applying community pressure. That was the way it was always done. Apply the application of community pressure within the confines of the woman's social circle. Right now, do you agree with me, for instance, that many divorces happen because women like to yap?
And I do agree with Andrew Wilson, right? Because he's talking from an old Victorian age framework. Because in the Victorian era, that's what it was. Like, women had social pressures, they were socially shamed. If the woman was out of line, one of the steps was the husband could go to the church, he can go to the family, and they would shame that woman. My thing is, I don't think most men want to do that today. My thing is now, if I have to go, me personally, this is for me, if I have to go to your mother, like with Latin women, like if the Latin woman is acting up, you can always call her mother and she can always get the chancletas. I don't believe that I have to go through your mother to get my wife, or to the church to get my wife to obey and respect me. Yeah, I tell you, I talk Jamaican right now. Me no believe, say, me or any man have to go to a secondary or third party source to get my woman to respect me and obey me and love me and them things. I don't believe so. Let me speak in English. I do not believe that I have to go to a church, to a third party source to get my woman to love and respect me. That means my woman don't love and respect me. And that also means that somebody else, that third party, has authority over my relationship more than I have authority over my own relationship. So in other words, I need to leave that woman alone. Right. But I understand what Andrew Wilson is trying to do. And when I break down the presentation, you're gonna understand.
So you get a freshly divorced woman, and she's free. You go, girl. Girl power. And
I do agree with that. Right? A lot of how women operate today, they're not being influenced by men. They're responding to each other's goofiness. So a woman can be a woman, like just like the serpent in the garden. She can see another woman in the best situation, perfect, like Eve in the garden. But she'll whisper in that woman's ear, you don't gotta listen to that nigga. You don't gotta listen to that nigga. You can go divorce him, go through your whole phase whatsoever, and divorce that man, and then trick that woman out of her good position. So I do agree with Andrew Wilson.
Starts talking to her little friends, and she starts telling them how liberating it is and how great it is and this and that. And this is why when women have divorced friends, their likelihood of divorce actually rapidly increases. It's for this reason.
Divorce is contagious.
So if it's the case that this social contagion is eliminated because now we have an ecclesiastical structure, an ecclesiastical authority, which won't grant it because you get ostracized from that social group through excommunication, for instance, or not being able to participate anymore with that community, that's an application of a serious and significant social pressure, which can do the very thing you want. Bring back that great institution, absent the state, and it avoids this whole problem of common law marriage. Because if it's the case that you can be common law married anyway, inside of a state, and they can get grounds for divorce on that anyway, then we actually need to have some social pressures to prevent them from doing that. So it sounds like
I agree with that.
We agree marriage
agree
is
with that.
awesome for men. Divorce is terrible for them. So it seems like.
But the problem you're not addressing. I agree with the social pressure part. The thing is that we've been applying social pressure to women for the past 50 since 2015, and women have just gotten worse since the Manosphere started, the black one, right? And it hasn't worked. The women just said fuck it, and it's going on Instagram or whatever, and they decided to twerk. Go look on the women on Instagram. The more you socially shame them, the worse they do. So that's not working. Look at Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips. Look at all these women that look at all these women that you see on social media. Do they respect what the men are saying? And then they're influencing other women to go be 304s. So that's the social pressure you're going up against, right? The only thing a man can do is like what CGA is saying. Well, he says free your Asian lifestyle. I say you control what woman has access to you. And you put barriers of entry around yourself to protect you, not to control the woman, right? In other words, the woman, your boundary, if the woman doesn't respect your rules, she don't get access to you. That's about it. But you can't, look, Bonnie Blue, right, and Lily Phillips, they're doing it specifically to spite men. And then later on, you'll hear Corinne Steffens try to convince you dudes you should be safe with a prostitute or you should be safe with a whore. This is what these women do. So they're not going to change. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. And I want to see Andrew Wilson's point, but I can't. According to where we are, it's like they're living in a cave. They're not hip to reality around them. Common sense and logic. When you walk outside your house, what do you see?
We should be attacking the divorce structure here, and it doesn't seem like you actually
No,
have
let me say be
anything to do
responsible.
that.
That doesn't take away from data, right? Data is objective based, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from common sense and logic, right? You should find a middle ground between the data that you see and then the common sense and logic that you have, and try to meet a middle ground into where how you can make something clear, concise, and cohesive to see what is the truth going on in the environment, right? And the truth going on in the environment when it comes to dating and mating is that the women don't want to follow the men. They don't. They don't have no plans to. And I don't think no social pressure is going to change that.
Other than just avoid the thing that's great for you, because this other bad side effect could happen.
Sure, that's like smoking cigarettes.
So why don't we attack the bad side effect when we have the mechanism to do it? It's not if, we can do it now.
Okay,
right
so like smoking cigarettes is the same analogy you're saying. Okay, here, cigarettes in this situation, we obviously know it has negative side effects, so you would avoid it. Now, here's the issue that I have with it. It sounds great on paper, but we can't travel to the land of make-believe. It sounds great. The majority of people probably wouldn't do it. And if you ask a guy, which this is an important part, they're not even prepared to even talk about that. They don't even know what divorce laws are. So you're asking them to travel to the land of make-believe under a marriage system that small percentage of people use. No one uses it today. You might have said they used it to the past. Today, that doesn't exist. So we can't travel to the land of make-believe to make marriage work for you. It might work in your marriage, but it doesn't work for the greater structure.
Your argument here.
So now what Coach Rick Adams is arguing is the objective reality versus how people live relative to themselves, right? And that is true again. How that might work for somebody in their own relative lifestyle, it might not work objectively. And objectively, society is moving through a more, as they're going to bring up secular, more modern day style. They're not moving according to the 1950s. Everybody is just like doing a hybrid of shit. Like I have admitted that I'm a hybrid, right? I have traditional values. At the same time, I move like how the market tells me to move, right? Now, what do I mean by that? You know what? Let me actually put that. I'm gonna present that later. But I'm a hybrid, right? Because I have traditional values, but I still indulge, meaning that I still indulge in the hookup culture, whatever. So I'm a hybrid, and I'm going to explain that a bit later, right? But the reason why I move like that is because that's how the market is. You have to move like that. You got to approach women on some sexual type of thing because that's what they respond best to. You feel me? So
contradicts itself because on the one hand you say men don't know enough about marriage, but my assumption is that your mission is to let men know about marriage.
Absolutely.
Okay, well then I don't understand how it's the land of make believe if you can let them know about this, but I can't.
Sure.
Right.
And
So
you can offer that.
So if
You
I
can offer
am,
that.
it sounds like I'm offering a real alternative to what you're offering. And here's what you're offering. Men, marriage is great. It's a great institution. It's the best for children. These are your words. In marriage, right? Men seem to thrive. Their health seems to thrive. Everything seems to thrive. You're saying, well, the problem is that divorce rates are high, and they are. However, there's a few things there that you haven't covered. One, it depends on demographic too. For instance,
Absolutely.
if you're black, it's going to be way worse than if you're white.
Correct.
Okay, way worse. And also socioeconomics matters, right? Demographics in general matter. So you can do a lot, actually, including prenuptial agreements. You can have a prenuptial agreement with the ecclesiastical authority without the state even involved. And it seems like that would mitigate your risk to damn near nothing.
how
You
would
said
but you need
if
somebody to back
about
that.
50 times
So did
today.
you.
Now, here's what I'm telling you.
So
I'm
did
telling you
you.
when, all right, we're already in this system. You're going outside of the system to create a scenario for me to argue
What
against.
system are you going outside of?
We're talking about marriage is typically done with the state. Almost everyone does it this way. So now
Typically is
you're
not-
here's hold
is
on for a
not
second. Hold on
must.
for a second. You've
Typically
moved the
doesn't mean
goalposts.
anything.
You've moved the goalposts to a scenario of if, and you're arguing
is.
from the if. No,
Is.
hold on for a second. You're arguing from the if perspective.
It is perspective.
No, listen.
It is.
Give me a
is
chance to
perspective.
listen.
All right,
Give
I'll
me a
give you the
chance.
Go ahead.
You're arguing from a very small percentage point. Now you're saying demographics, and we can talk about that, but you're still trying to get me to argue in your cloud of if. That's the land of make believe. Most people, by far, are married to the state. Not only that,
Right.
your land of make
Because now when you go to the state, you're going to get more tax benefits. There's certain benefits you get when you marry to the state. Understand? So that's what most people are doing. Even when you go to a church and it's certified a marriage, like you're still going to the state to make that marriage official, which is what most people are doing. You feel me? So culture's right.
believe still exists. The prenup with the ecclesiastics, you can write whatever you want in that prenup. It only matters in the divorce. That's the reality. So I'm still dealing in reality.
So
You're
am
in
I.
the clouds. Hold on for a second. You're in the
Okay.
clouds. So let's take the demographics.
Okay.
In your scenario, it sounds like, which would be fair, your primary concern is with white people.
No. It's with
Hold
all
on for a
people.
second. You said with black people, the demographics, the chance is higher.
Yeah.
So have you discovered the ecclesiastics approach to black people married within this?
Yes.
However, their demographics, economics, which all do affect marriage, has nothing to do in the land of the clouds or the make-believe with ecclesiastics.
No, they don't.
It's all going to boil down to in the law. And there's no church reverend that's going to go into your household to make sure there's social pressure on your wife. Do you know
yes,
any?
sir. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know any that can cover all marriages?
So some reverend again, this is like Victorian age style. I don't even think in the Victorian era they were doing that. Some reverend is not going to go into your house and force your wife to have sex with you or to obey and listen to you. Again, I don't like that. And I think when you talk about most black men, I don't think most black men are going to like that either. Some church Negro or church cracker is going to, or church graham cracker is going to come in and dictate. Boy,
That
Yes.
answer is no.
Yes. And by the way, when you keep
Are we in reality here?
I'm
or are we in
trying-
the clouds?
when
I mean,
you're-
we're
when
not
you're-
we're not arguing
I was
anything
just trying-
legitimate.
I was just
this
trying
is
to-
this is in the land of make believe.
Well, when
We
I'm
don't have
allowed to
enough-
respond, let
Okay,
me
give me
know.
a second.
Go
Let
ahead.
me finish this point.
Go ahead.
You're imagining. Your imagination is great. John Lennon would be great. You know, you would be proud of you at this particular point.
But I'm imagining all the people.
You're imagining all the people under a situation and a structure that you brought in here. All right. But the state highly governs this, and the state highly governs divorce. I'm dealing in a reality situation where I'm trying to counsel men to give information to. The best thing you've told me is that you're willing to give men the option to do this. Are they willing to all do this option? The answer is probably not, just like they're not willing to do what I'm telling you them to do. However, we're both attempting, which is a good thing. It's noble. However, your
Even
situation.
Coach acknowledges that a lot of men don't want to follow him. So Coach understands that. And I don't think Coach is trying to force people to follow him either. But he understands, like, him trying to tell them about free agent lifestyle, there's going to be a lot of men that don't agree. Right? He can't force this on them. All he could do is present the information and the knowledge.
Rarely exists. Can we talk about the reality?
Let me put it back to
counsel men to give highly.
But I'm imagining.
Okay, give me a second. Let me finish this point.
Go ahead.
You're imagining. Your imagination is great. John Lennon would be great. You would be proud of you at this particular point.
But I'm imagining all the people.
You're imagining all the people under a situation and a structure that you brought in here. All right. But the state highly governs this, and the state highly governs divorce. I'm dealing in a reality situation where I'm trying to counsel men to give information to. The best thing you've told me is that you're willing to give men the option to do this. Are they willing to all do this option? The answer is probably not, just like they're not willing to do what I'm telling them to do. However, we're both attempting, which is a good thing. It's noble. However, your situation rarely exists. Can we talk about the reality of what exists?
Sure.
Absolutely. So let's take your moral religious crusade out of it and talk about the reality.
Yeah, let's
Are
not.
you willing to do that?
Yeah, well, here's the thing.
See, you're not willing to do that
Well,
because it's all based on your reality.
Guess what? It's a debate, and I will argue my points from my view, how I see fit. It's not for you to govern.
But what I'm not going to do is expect
not
to
my
be arguing
government.
from the land of make-believe.
Yeah, but it's
okay.
not, you
all
don't-
right. So
okay,
anybody
yeah, my
have
turn.
So
My
right
turn.
there, he's trying to get. So what happened is that Andrew Wilson is trying to get Coach to argue his point, argue in his world, and Coach was like, no, because most people are not doing that. So Coach is like, no, the best place to argue is the objective realm, the truth, not what's relative or subjective to that person, which is Andrew Wilson. And that's a good move to make, because I'm not going to argue you about what's relative to you or what's subjective to you. I'm going to argue you the facts. Like if you tell me, oh, men never held women accountable, I don't want to hear what you do subjective to yourself. I want to argue historically, is that true? Because most men historically have held women accountable to something. Right.
You have the anybody have the sound effect for the television show where the train comes through, Mr. Rogers?
Let me know when
because I want to be on Earth.
Yeah, let me know.
All
when
right,
you gas
Let's
out.
let Andrew respond.
Yeah, so the thing is it's funny that you bring up Imagine All the People of John Lennon, which is an anti-religious song. And hilariously enough, was designed to assist with female empowerment. Isn't that hilarious? But the thing here is you keep on saying that what I'm offering is make-believe, but it's not. It's been governing the Orthodox and Catholic Church for 2,000 years, including in this country. Now, here, let me give you an example, for instance, the Amish, right? Do you know what the divorce rate is among them? It's almost non.
And that's where he lost the battle. Because when you bring up the Amish and all those Catholic people, a lot of those Catholic church, they do a lot of child molestation to the kids. When you bring up the Amish people, that's a very small community, so they know each other. The Amish community is not a big civilization with multiple different religions and belief systems. They're one group. And I think something in the Amish community where they allow the children to leave the Amish community to go experience life and then come back. So, Andrew Wilson, what are you talking about?
Exist in, yet they're still governed by the same laws of the land that you're speaking to. So sounds like if I give a counter, if I say, look, I can give you a way, a methodology in which you can utilize the religious
we don't even know how the Amish community, we don't even know. We do not know how we don't know the secrets to the Amish community to be using them.
ecclesiastical institution which has existed for 2,000 years and has right now the lowest divorce rates. Right this second as we speak, not in make-believe land, not hundreds of years in the future. right this second, as opposed to the system you have of common law divorce, which is sky high and you can't do anything about it. That's what is true. So pointing out what is true is right now you can have a prenup. That is true. What is true is prenups are usually held up in court. That is true. What is true is that you can have a marriage.
You remember I remember Young Jeezy and Jeannie Ma. There's certain prenups that can be worked around because you got some like deviant divorce attorneys out there that hate men. So
outside of a state because it's a religious institution anyway. You never have to have a license with the state. It's never been necessary. And if you do, the only way that can be done is if it's sacramental. And if it's sacramental, it's governed now by the church. That's going to be the community the women are a part of. And so the thing is like,
are women going to be part of that community? So
sounds like a real viable solution. What's yours? More fucking degeneracy? Go out and play the field, hump a lot of chicks? How's that going to help anybody do anything?
I think Coach Greg Adams has said, I've heard him say it in the live, go monk mode. I heard him say it in the live, go monk mode. I've heard him say, free agent lifestyles, don't date low quality women. So I don't think that's what Coach Greg Adams' message is. I don't know where he got that from.
That's been the progressive mantra for 100 years. Isn't it wonderful?
Also,
your turn.
All right, we're returning back to earth. Now, first things first, when it comes to this, back in reality, there's no God in marriage. So Mr. Sky Daddy, God, religion, that's all great, but there's no God.
He's correct, and I'm going to break down why he's correct.
God in marriage. At this particular point, when you go through a marriage, if one person decides to not obey the Holy Bible or whatever you're thumping, you have no basis to keep that marriage together. If she decides to leave the church and decides not to listen or excommunicate herself, she's now under the state.
Agree.
Now, when you're getting divorced, which I'm assuming you've been divorced.
Well, I mean, that's a hell of an assumption to make.
Have you been divorced?
Well, I mean,
have you been married?
Can you tell me, if you can tell me how that has any merit?
Give me a second, because if you've been through one, you would know that there's no God in the divorce court, in the family court. There's no God in there. No one asked you.
There is the state in there.
There is the state. So that's what we're arguing for.
Yeah,
that's when you get married. So you're telling me if, and I'm telling you, well, this is what's going to happen. Even if you took Sky Daddy into court with you, they would say, you pray to the judge. The judge is the authority in the court. So the God argument is a nice, interesting argument. And I probably am not going to stay on the conversation very long because that's your God. That's your Sky Daddy. That's your religion. I have a different religion. So who gives you who gives you the authority to change the understanding, the conversation to your religion? That's your religion.
I'm not changing the conversation.
Okay, so it only works if it only works if you believe in your Sky Daddy. That's the only way it works, and that's the only way you're going to advise men.
We're talking about mitigating risk.
No. We're talking about, can men get into a marriage today only under your Sky Daddy? That's what we're assuming.
Okay.
Now, can they do it otherwise?
Yeah.
That was the initial question.
You can have secular.
The initial question was a mitigating risk. The initial question was, is marriage good for men today? And then Andrew tried to change it by saying, no, it's not the marriage, it's the divorce. And I already debunked that. That's stupid. In order to get to the divorce, you have to be married.
Marriage.
Okay. Go ahead and explain.
Okay. Yeah.
Make it work.
I just did. So
make it work.
The argument that you have is that marriage is great. It's a great institution.
We already covered this.
Well, what made it great?
We already covered this.
What made it great?
Can we go into why it would make it work for your secular? That's the question I ask you. You're asking me questions back. Go ahead and and answer the question.
So if you're talking about secular marriage, there's never been any point to it.
I'm sorry?
There's never been any point to secular marriage, ever. Never. What would ever be the point of secular marriage? It's always been a religious institution. That's what made it great. Now, when you say it's a great institution, what made it great for secularists, other than the fact that Sky Daddy and God had all these enforcement arms and those things had to be enforced socially? Like, for instance, men weren't allowed to run away. And women, right, they had to show cause for these divorces. And they had to be good causes. They had to show it for things like infidelity, right? It was all biblically governed. It was all lawfully governed by this Sky Daddy guy you like.
So men couldn't run away from a bitch? Oh, no. So that is true. During the Victorian era, right? The men couldn't just divorce a woman and the woman couldn't just divorce men. So men were not allowed to divorce the woman. So you had to prove that. So I'm going to do a Victorian age series about that, content on that. But my problem is that you want men to do that today. You want men to stick into be obligated to a woman that don't like him, don't have sex with him, and the only time he's supposed to can get sex from her is if some sky pastor, shout out to Coach Sky Daddy or some sky pastor nigga, force her to suck your dick?
So little, but that's what made the institution great in the first place. And what you're talking about here, you're making a point that divorce is bad, and yet I agree, divorce is bad. So what we're really talking about is how do we mitigate the risk for divorce? And we have two different methods here.
Well, the conversation is marriage good for men. That's the conversation.
But it is. We already said it's good for men. That's not even in dispute.
And now, how do we make it better since they're avoiding it? Since men or women are avoiding it.
It sounds like the thing that you think makes it bad is divorce, not marriage.
Correct.
Then listen, we need to mitigate divorce.
We're 15 minutes in, and we are in the land of reality. You finally called up. Can you tell me how we can get to the secular marriage? I mean, I've given you a chance. So you're dragging your feet.
So again, secular, there's never been any point to secular marriage ever.
Now listen, marriage is for child creation. It would be great for child community and all of these things. And now listen, by the time the religious
what's going to happen? Men are going to figure out a way. You remember a movie anime called Appleseed, and they figured out a way how to create something called the bioroids, and the bioroids can basically give birth. So I'm thinking men are going to figure out a way to bypass that, and that's going to be long before my time. I mean, long after my time, right? I probably won't see that, and I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
In the marriage, they were chopping people's heads.
What other option do men have to do?
It's off and burning Bibles. So listen, I know we want to take it back to the past and act like the past was better, but there's always a negative part of the past. If you go back and you look at the English, this has all been there. People were getting their heads chopped off. The Crusaders were doing their things across countries, and they were spreading Christianity through threats and violence. Have to do with anything? Now, that's what you're trying to uplift. That's what you're trying to.
No, this is what I disagree with Coach, because just because when you go back to the Roman Empire, when you go back to the Vikings, when you go back to these places and they had negative things going around, even the Christian Crusades, doesn't mean you can't take the good things out of those eras, adapt it and adjust it for the modern day to make it work, right? That's called evolution, or what you call innovation. You take what's good from the past and you disregard what was bad from the past to create something better for today, for tomorrow and the future. Right, so that's why I disagree with Coach Greg Adams there.
Uphold.
I don't even know what the hell you're talking about.
You wouldn't know what I'm talking about.
I don't.
That's where you're lacking.
I have no
idea. So catch up. You're sitting across from me.
What does the Crusades have to do with divorce?
That was when your holy marriage was the best marriage that you're trying to go to. Now listen.
In the 1950s? Were we crusading in the 1950s?
No.
What the hell are you talking about?
You talked about I guess when your holy marriage listen, by the time the religious aspects got into marriage, they were chopping people's heads off and burning Bibles. So listen, religion in marriage is had, and yet I agree. You're making a point, but that's what made the institution great in the first place. And what you're talking about here, you're making a point that divorce is bad, and yet I agree, divorce is bad. So what we're really talking about is how do we mitigate the risk for divorce? And we have two different methods here. Well, the conversation is marriage good for men. That's the conversation.
But it is. We already said it's good for men. That's not even in dispute.
And now, how do we make it better since they're avoiding it? Since men or women are avoiding it.
It sounds like the thing that you think makes it bad is divorce, not marriage.
Correct.
Then listen, we need to mitigate divorce.
We're 15 minutes in, and we are in the land of reality. You finally called up. Can you tell me how we can get to the secular marriage? I mean, I've given you a chance. So you're dragging your feet.
So again, secular, there's never been any point to secular marriage ever.
Now listen, marriage is for child creation. It would be great for child community and all of these things. And now listen, by the time the religious aspects got into marriage, they were chopping people's heads off and burning Bibles. So listen, I know we want to take it back to the past and act like the past was better, but there's always a negative part of the past. If you go back and you look at.
So, Coach, you don't have to focus on the negative parts of the past. You can take the positive parts of the past and adjust it for the modern day. And I'm going to go through that in my presentation too. Right? The positive things that in the past that work, you can still bring them to the future and make them work for today. And innovate and evolve. Right? Civilized, we have always done that, right? We've taken things from how Troy fell, learned about those Trojan horses, and then now what do we do? What do we do now? We curate TSAs, or like what 9/11 happened, right? What did we do after that? Now you got to get checked at immigration, or the TSA check you or search you, right? So we can look at the past and study what went wrong, and then what went right, and adjust, evolve, and innovate for a better to modern day society, and create something for a better future. We don't just throw out what the term is, throw out the baby with the bathwater, or throw out the bathwater with the baby, however that term goes.
The English. This has all been there. People were getting their heads chopped off. The Crusaders were doing their things across countries, and they were spreading Christianity through threats and violence.
What does that have to do with anything?
Now, that's what you're trying to uplift. That's what you're trying to uphold.
I don't even know what the hell you're talking about.
You wouldn't know what I'm talking
I
about.
don't.
That's where you're lacking.
I have no
so
idea.
Catch up. You're sitting in the
What
cross
does the
from me.
Crusades have to do with divorce?
That was when your holy marriage was the best marriage that you're trying to go to. Now, listen.
In the
if we're trying to drag it back-
1950s? Were we
That's
Crusades?
just why I agree with Andrew Wilson, right? We look at the 1950s. When you look at up until the 1950s, right? You weren't chopping people's heads off during the Christian Crusades then. You weren't, right? Both black people and white people, even though black people are under different circumstances, right? When black people engaged into that traditional relationship, they did pretty good. As fact, black people did better than a lot of other people, other groups of people, right? So I agree with Andrew Wilson there. When you go back to the 1950s into that era, you know what I'm saying? You weren't chopping people's heads off.
In the 1950s?
No.
What the hell are you talking about?
You talked about the institution of marriage for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Sir, do you need me to catch you up on what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
but
You're having trouble keeping up with me.
Do you know what
You're
marriage was
having
like
trouble
50 years
keeping up
ago?
with me. You said
I am
2,000 years ago.
Truly,
and
your
I told you
intellect is
2,000
dizzying.
years ago, they were chopping people's heads off.
Which has what to do with
I
anything?
need you to catch up with me, sir.
Okay.
If you want to take things back to the past, you have to accept everything as the past.
No, you don't. You don't have to go back to the past, but what you can do is learn from it and learn about the good things about the past, and then discard the bad things about the past, which I already explained that.
You can't just cherry pick.
What?
Now, here's the thing. You're cherry picking. If you want to take things back to tradition, take it all the way back. Why stop at the 50s? Take it back to the 1890s.
Nah, see, there got to be a difference between cherry picking and what the context is. If you're cherry picking the good things from a past and then disregarding the bad things from the past, it's not bad, right? So
What you're saying right now is so incoherent. I actually don't even understand
Well,
it.
that's what. Listen, when you're
It's
when you're running out of bullets,
incoherent.
when you're running out of bullets,
Oh,
the
it's
last
just
thing you do
incoherent.
is the shame. All right,
I'm
listen,
not even trying to
are
shame you. It's
struggling?
just incoherent.
I need you to catch up with me.
Okay, catch me up.
Just say you're lacking if you can't keep it up.
It's
all right,
an
now here's the
incoherent-
problem.
it's incoherent.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem.
I don't know what to tell you.
Here's the problem you're having.
2,000 years ago, they were chopping heads off. Who gives a shit?
Listen,
What does that have
you
to do with
said
anything?
2,000 years ago. I'm coming up with yours. Your holy religious 2,000 years ago. It's been a part of
What
the
does that
institution.
have to do with this?
Exactly. Here's the problem. You're cherry picking.
Cherry picking what?
Listen,
I'm listening.
I'm gonna slow you down. I'm gonna
Slow
slow
me
you
way
down because
down.
I see what you're doing here. I'm gonna slow you down.
Okay.
Because it's hard for you to keep up.
It is. You're
I
right.
understand.
I
I
am-
understand because you
I
haven't
am
been across. This is your
bedazzled.
toughest debate. Your audience knows this.
Oh, it's rough.
There's no God in marriage
Okay.
in the United States.
Yeah.
Can we agree to that? When you get to divorce, there's no God in
we
marriage.
can't agree to that.
We need to agree to it because when you go into divorce court,
Yeah.
there's no God.
Yeah,
you
but
can't bring in your God
thought-
and your
Hold your
Bible.
right right there.
And at that particular point, none of your ecclesiastics marriage works.
Okay.
Period.
So the thing is, you just said, can we agree that there's no God in marriage? And then he switched.
You don't have to agree.
But hang on, calm down. And then he switched over to divorce. There's no God in divorce. But those are two different questions and proposition. Hang on, relax. The second thing is that me saying that what made marriage a great institution is this whole Sky Daddy character, and that the institution has been in place for 2,000 years, and it's
Yeah,
been.
2,000
Hang on,
years.
calm down.
2,000
And it's
years.
been a strong institution. I'm not actually sure how tying in that at the time they cut people's heads off, what that has to do with the fact that in the 1950s and 40s, you still had 95% of these marriages staying together. This is not ancient history. This is not even early American history.
I agree with Andrew Wilson there, right? What Coach does, and that's in this instance, right? When you talk about tradition, he'll go all the way back to like the barbarians. I'll go all the way back to the Vikings and shit. When we're talking about tradition, we're talking about the Victorian era up into the 1950s. When you go to the Victorian era, it was basically the refinement of the human chaos, right? It was the refinement of masculinity and manhood and the chaotic nature of human beings. And it was an efficient system, right? It still had flaws in it, but it was the most efficient. Now, when you get to the 1940s and 50s now, it wasn't as harsh as it was in the Victorian era when it first started. So I agree with Andrew Wilson in this instance, and I disagree with Coach, because when we talk about tradition, we're not talking about in the Viking era where it was more brutal. We're talking about from Victorian era up until the 1940s, or 50s, which is the most recent, because I think that was like, 60, 70 years ago.
That's in your grandfather's lifetime, basically. And this, by the way, that was the case for black marriages as well. Very strong institutions. Correct. But all of those institutions were that way because they followed that whole sky daddy thing. Correct. They were like, oh, that sky daddy's going to smite us if we don't. And so what you do here is you're giving the classic progressive argument, which is, well, guys, it is true that it's a great institution, and it is true it's the best place in the world to have children.
And this is why I disagree with Andrew Wilson, right? Because he should be smart enough to know the difference between, if I'm telling men, say for example me, I'm telling men to be sovereign in your masculinity and have your own autonomy in dating, and you don't have to, if you don't want to marry a woman, you don't have to. If you don't want to risk your finances on dealing with a woman that don't respect you, you don't have to. You could be single, right? Like with the free agent lifestyle, I say sovereign masculinity. You can have autonomy and decide how you want to operate as a man, as a straight black man. I should be more specific, right? You don't have to do that. I'm not being progressive. I'm not being liberal. I'm not telling men to do any of that. I'm telling men, step yourself up and live the life you want to live it, especially as black men, because as black men, we've never had the opportunity since slavery up until now to live the life the way we want to live our life as black men. We've always had to perform for the culture, the community, for the women and everybody else, but be ourselves. So if I telling black men to now be sovereign in your masculinity and be sovereign with your identity, and choose how you want to live your life, so long as it's righteous and you're honest and you're being responsible with yourself, do that. If you don't want to be in a relationship, you don't have to be in a relationship. If you want to smash, you can smash. If you want to get married, do that. But be it because that's something you want to do and you're being responsible and structured in how you move, right? That's not a progressive talking point. You feel me? Progressive talking point is like, go have sex and be irresponsible and curate all kind of bullshit. I'm not like, you should be intelligent enough to differentiate the two, right? Feminism is telling women to go be sex and hate men and rebel against the patriarchy. I'm not telling men to go rebel against women or to hate women. As a matter of fact, I would tell men to stay away from bad women. So,
continuation of the species, and also it's fantastic for men's health. It's fantastic for their mental health. It's great for them in almost every way. But that divorce thing is real bad, and I counter.
Is it really? I'm going to go into a series of that. How marriage is really wasn't really healthy for men back in the day.
You're right. That divorce thing is real bad. We have now a center of agreement. But now we're going back to the marriage in the West thing, which is that whole great institution problem. Well, if we agree that what made it good, which you just did, is, hey, that Sky Daddy guy, and then I point out that right now you can still utilize that Sky Daddy guy for an ecclesiastical marriage outside of the state. Hang on. And the only thing you could do is say, what about common law? But you can't govern anybody from common law. And at least in the ecclesiastical institution, you have social pressures on women to stay married. You can't offer a man anything like that. Give me a single social pressure you can offer that would actually keep these marriages together. One. What? One. Just one.
Can I answer something
Yeah.
you just said? This would be interesting.
I can't wait.
You said
but can you answer that question then
No,
ask?
before.
Oh, of
the
course.
1940s.
Of course, you gotta ask me a question.
Because
before you
listen,
answer
I'm listening to you. You asked the question at the end. If you would have asked it at the beginning, possibly I might have been able to address it. But let me address this point.
Okay.
You said the 1940s and 1950s with this imaginary sky daddy controlling marriages. That sounds like enforcement, because by the time the
Doesn't it?
1970s came around, the very first chance women got to file a no-fault divorce without need for evidence, without need.
Culture's correct. Because under the Victorian law, you was enforcing things on women, and the moment you gave them that little bit of freedom to leave, they left. They left, which means either they didn't like that situation, they didn't like the nigga they was with, they didn't love the guy they was with. Like, that is a good point brought up by Coach. The moment that you gave women the freedom or the option to leave, they left.
To have a private investigator to prove an affair.
Was no
they
fault the
did.
70s?
Yes.
You didn't even have to prove that your man was cheating. You could just leave. Coach is correct.
And he started by
So now,
wrong
if
rape.
that happens, how are you going to convince them to go back to that?
Yeah.
I'll educate you.
But hang on.
Came along. Hold on for a second. No.
Yeah.
I got the
Go
floor
ahead.
here. I got the floor. So you said the religious institutions governed it and made it great. The 1970s came along, and as soon as they did,
Feminism.
women started to file divorces at record rates, which is back to my conversation. Soon as you remove the authority of Sky Daddy, now you're back with the state. And now you have difficulty, and now the risk is now greater.
Wow.
So that's the issue that
Then
you
it
have.
sounds like men should be moving towards Sky Daddy then, because it mitigates the risk.
The courts, the nation should be
There's
moving
no
towards
courts.
that. But how do you enforce that?
What court? What courts?
your land
You're
is
not
in-
getting a marriage from the state. What courts are involved here?
Everything you told me is a make-believe scenario.
How? You can
You're
do it
telling-
right now. How is it make believe?
How do you do that when people the
Here's what you
marriages
do.
do state?
Yeah.
I know you want to
I'm
go back
tell
to
you
actually
how.
going to answer those questions.
This
No,
is
I'm
gonna
telling
be
you,
a
you can
problem.
do it right
Okay.
this second.
Okay,
You
can
could go do it right now.
You can do it at this particular
can't
point.
do.
However,
What do you mean?
Here's the problem.
Okay.
Can you get men to do it?
Yes.
Okay, you might be able to think you can get men to do it, but as soon as they do it, I want you to stick around for the average of 8 to 10 years when these men start getting divorced. See, what you're doing is you're leading.
We've
men,
been
hold on
watching
for a
it for
second.
longer.
You've been leading. You're going to lead men into a burning building.
Oh.
And the reason why, and this is a famous quote by Martin Luther King, is because the laws of integration didn't catch up fast enough for what he wanted for people to integrate. And what happened was
That's true. Because at the time of Martin Luther King, people didn't like black people to be integrated into their society. You feel me? And then now you have black people integrating into an America that did not like them and wasn't going to treat them fair by any stretch of the matter. So now when he's integrating you into something, when he's in, for example, people don't know that when black people got integrated into white America, that's when black people became in debt and was slave to the banking system. Because before that, black people was not allowed to get purchase homes from white America. They were not allowed to get mortgages. So what they had to do, they had to create their own monetary systems. And when black people did that, the money wasn't in the system. The money, I'm gonna do a video about that, right? Because I already have that set up for that. But black people, because they were not allowed to engage in the credit and debt system of America at the time, before integration, they had to create up their own banking system. They had to create up their own monetary system amongst each other. You feel me? So, and then after integration, they became slave to predatory lending. Shit like they would have higher premium mortgage rates, to interest rates higher than white people. And then by the time the 2008 housing crash happened, a lot of black people was not able to pay off their mortgage enough to own that property, and they lost their homes. So, I'm gonna go through that in the next video. But TJ is correct. right? At the time, America was not ready for black people to be integrated with them, with white America. And black people were a lot stronger by themselves.
It took him 12 to 15 years to realize that he led men or black people into a burning building in which integration was not possible at the time.
Okay.
You are also proposing the same thing. And I would like for you to stick around to see the results of what you're proposing, because eventually you would have to pay the price. How did Martin Luther King pay the price? You would have to pay the price for the men that you misled.
So Martin Luther misled men, and that's why he was killed?
I said he misled black people. You missed that part.
He
said, okay, let me repeat it, because you're slow. All right, you definitely are slow, Neanderthal.
That's for sure.
Let me tell you something.
I'm dragging
Martin Luther King said specifically, related to black people and civil rights, I'll speak slowly for you, that he believed at the end, he led them into a burning building. I'm going to speak slower. The reason why is because the laws of integration did not catch up with what he would like to present. Black people weren't ready to integrate. As a result, he said, I may have led my people, that means his people, into a burning building.
Okay.
I would like for you, under your scenario, if your movement takes off, to see the results, because it took Martin Luther King 12, 15 years to see the results of his efforts. You're proposing something very extreme that majority of people aren't going to do. But let's just say because you like to hide in the clouds of make-believe, if this works, I would love to see you represent these men in a divorce when they get their head bit off by these so-called women that are forced by Sky Daddy to stay in these marriages.
This is really, I don't even understand how
you don't understand. I know you have a hard time understanding.
I don't actually even understand how to respond to a lot of this because it's so incoherent. But I'm going to try anyway.
Oh yeah, see, this is.
So let's start.
This is his always incoherent.
Yeah, rather than him saying he doesn't understand, or he just like to say, it's incoherent. He does that a lot. Like, you've been beaten. Let's admit you've been beaten. Right? It's okay. Anyway, so I'm gonna drop it there for time's sake, and I'm going to go into my presentation. So this is what Andrew Wilson is talking about when he's referring to what he wants to go back to, right? Let me fix it properly. All right, here we go. In the Victorian era, the law heavily favored men as heads of household, but there was also strict societal and legal expectations around fidelity, dowries, and gender roles. Enforcement wasn't just spiritual, it was legal, which was backed by the state, Andrew Wilson. Men could enforce certain rules in court, which is backed by the state, like protecting inheritance or seeking legal redress for adultery. And women were socially constrained in ways that are nearly impossible today, which is what Coach Greg Adams was telling you. Wilson's concept of a biblical Christian framework seems inspired by that era's ideals of covenant, male leadership, and marital accountability. But what worked then relied heavily on social, legal, and economic enforcement that modern society does not provide, right? Modern secular society. Today, most societies are secular. Legal marriage exists, but civil law is neutral. The state doesn't enforce spiritual covenant standards, it enforces contracts, custody, and property division. Men often avoid marriage because of the risk of divorce. This is what I'm saying. In order to get to the divorce part, you have to be married. Financial laws are dealing with women who misrepresent themselves or reject traditional male authority. Women's autonomy in modern secular society means that biblical covenant expectations can't be enforced through the state. They only work if both partners voluntarily commit to them within a religious framework. Practical implications of Wilson's plan were if Wilson's plans were implemented. If marriage became entirely ecclesiastical, men and women would only be bound to spiritual religious laws. Civil protection, divorce courts, property division, child custody might not apply, leaving men and women to rely on their religious institutions for enforcement. In practice, many men might avoid marriage entirely because they see the risk of being locked into a woman who doesn't respect the covenant. There would be no secular safety net if the relationship fails. For religious committed men and women, it could strengthen the covenant and reduce casual mismatched marriages, but in society where most people are secular or indifferent to church authority, the system would likely be ignored or bypassed by the majority, which is what Coach Greg Adams was saying, right? Social dynamics and male hesitation. Most men today hesitate to marry for fear of legal and financial consequences from divorce. A purely ecclesiastical framework would shift accountability to the church, which is just changing one authority from the state into the church, right? So you're trading one God for the next. But that works only if men trust the institution, and the church is not to be trusted today. Men don't trust the church today as it is, right? And women honor its rules, and women don't honor the church's rules. So men don't trust the institution, and women don't honor its rules. For men skeptical of women's intentions, the lack of secular enforcement could actually increase risk because there's no court or legal system to intervene if partner misrepresents herself or leaves the covenant. Wilson's plan may work in small, devout subset of society, like the Amish, but for the majority of secular men and women, it would likely discourage marriage rather than encourage it, because legal safety nets they rely on today would disappear. In other words, the Victorian ideal cannot simply be transplanted into modern secular culture without massive social adaptation, which means that you would have to now raise children in the church and hold them accountable to the rules. And that doesn't always work, because I know a lot of women who are 304s that came up from the church. Anyway, the dating to marriage pipeline in the secular world. In the modern secular culture, courtship is multi-layered. Initial approach, right? Dating apps. So this is what the issue that this is the nuances that Andrew Wilson misses, right? When you talk about dating to marriage, right? Because marriage is the gateway. You have to get married before the divorce. But before you enter the marriage, this is what goes on, right? Initial approach, dating apps, social interaction, mutual networks. First dates, then repeated dates. Become exclusive, girlfriend / boyfriend. Long-term compatibility tests before even discussing marriage, which is the girlfriend stage, right? Wilson's ecclesiastical model assumes people are willing to buy into covenant early. But most secular women and men won't agree to a marriage framework outside the state without extensive emotional investment first, right? So they got to trust each other and emotionally invest into each other. Power dynamics and female autonomy. Secular women today exercise significant choice and autonomy in relationships. They expect to be courted to assess attraction, emotional compatibility, and lifestyle alignment before committing. Asking a secular woman to follow a church-based marital framework before she's invested in is unrealistic, because secular culture places power in the woman's hands. Many won't accept ecclesiastical rules unless they're already socially or religiously conditioned. So that's the issue Andrew Wilson is going into. The secular woman has too much power because they're being backed by the state. So they're not going to accept ecclesiastical rules so easily, unless now your group was raised in the church or you're socially conditioned for it, which is not the majority of women. Church institutions and structural limitations. Even with Christian institutions, there is variability in enforcement and belief. Many churches don't rigorously enforce pre-marriage standards or virginity ideals, right? I'm going to read this again. Even within Christian institutions, there's variability in enforcement and belief. Many churches don't rigorously enforce pre-marriage standards or virginity ideals. For Wilson's vision to work fully, he would need either strong buy-in from existing church hierarchies, which may not happen, or his own institution to control the framework, which again will lead Andrew Wilson to be an authoritative dictator, which always leads to Marxism and communism, right? Which risks sectarian isolation and limits scale, right? What does that mean? Because you don't have enough people to buy into your own institution, and then you are isolating yourself. You don't have any backing or funding by anybody. So this is going to limit your scale up into a massive movement. So you still have to convince people that, like how Marcus Garvey with the UNIA, you would have to convince people to join your movement. And you ain't no Marcus Garvey, Andrew Wilson. Virginity as a flawed proxy for commitment or attraction. Virginity alone does not guarantee attraction, respect, or stability. Sexual inexperience doesn't prevent women from rejecting partners. So this is important, right? Virginity doesn't guarantee attraction, respect, or stability. Sexual inexperience doesn't prevent women from rejecting partners they don't find attractive, developing unstable emotions or attachments, leaving a marriage later. Historical and contemporary examples exist of devout women who were virgins but still divorced and became promiscuous. Like you see that shit all over TikTok. I think there's a story of this white dude and this white couple, right? And they were both devout Christians. The white woman divorced her man to go be for the streets, and he ended up unaliving her for that. Key gap in Wilson's plan. Wilson seems to assume that church-backed framework plus female virginity equals guaranteed marriage stability, but what that overlooks modern female psychology, autonomy, and attraction patterns. In the secular world, the dating, emotional sexual dynamics are far more complex than historical classical ideas can control. Without addressing female choice, attraction, and human psychology, his plan is unlikely to achieve broad adoption, especially outside religious subcultures. Right? Wilson's ecclesiastical marriage model is theoretically neat, but practically limited in modern society. It relies on women already being religiously conditioned, church enforcement structures, assumptions about virginity and male authority. All three of these fail to account for the fluid, decentralized, and choice-driven nature of secular dating today. What's decentralized? It's decentralized from a patriarchal Christian model. Everybody's doing what they want to do. There's no more God when it comes to marriage. This is to express Coach Greg Adams' point. Marriage under the state. Modern marriage, as recognized by governments, is primarily a legal contract. The state's involvement gives people certain rights and responsibilities. Property division, inheritance tax benefits, custody of children, divorce, and legal remedies. The state does not enforce religious or moral commitments. Whether a couple prays together, follows religious covenants, or keeps spiritual vows is irrelevant to the law. And that's what Coach Greg Adams means, that there's no God in state marriage. There's no God in marriage. No more God. Saying there's no more God means the legal framework ignores spiritual authority. Marriage is no longer inherently seen as a covenant under God. The state defines marriage, who can marry, what counts as divorce, etc. Rather than God, scripture, or religious tradition. The moral and spiritual rate of marriage is decoupled from its legal weight. A couple may be legally married but spiritually unbound or uncommitted, right? Implications for relationship. Couples may treat marriage as a flexible contract rather than a sacred covenant. Men and women may enter or exit marriage based on pragmatic or personal considerations, not divine or moral principles. For those who believe in God-centered marriage, this means the state's recognition cannot guarantee the spiritual success or stability of a marriage, right? Cultural critique. Andrew Wilson argues that this godless marriage model encourages casual attitude towards commitment, reduces marriage to a transactional legal arrangement, ignores spiritual covenant responsibility between husband and wife. And I agree with Andrew Wilson on that point, right? I don't disagree, but most people are not having a classical marriage. They're having that secular marriage to the state, like Coach Greg Adams was saying, that has no God, right? In short, saying there's no more God in marriage highlights that civil marriage is legal, not spiritual. The state can grant rights, enforce contracts, and dissolve unions, but it cannot enforce fidelity, love, respect, or divine covenant obligation. Marriage becomes about the law, not God, right? If you remove the state entirely from marriage, enforcement becomes extremely difficult, and here's why. State versus ecclesiastical enforcement. With the state, laws enforce property division, child custody, alimony, and divorce proceedings. Breaking marriage vows can have concrete legal consequences. Without the state, purely ecclesiastical, enforcement is left to the church of religious institutions. The church can excommunicate, deny sacraments, or refuse to bless ceremonies, but it cannot seize property, enforce child support, or prevent divorce in the secular sense. Compliance is voluntary. If a spouse disagrees, there's no legal backstep. So that's the problem by separating state from the church. When things goes awry, what's there to enforce it? Who's going to draw up the contract for child support? Who's going to enforce that? When you will have two people that don't want to be with each other anymore. The voluntary covenant problem. The classical marriage relies on both parties agreeing to honor spiritual obligations. Human nature complicates this. Women or men might opt out if they no longer feel attracted, committed, or supported. right? So voluntary covenant problem. Classical marriage relies on both parties agreeing to honor spiritual obligation. Human nature complicates this. Women or men might opt out if they no longer feel attracted or committed or supported. Virginity or prior purity does not guarantee obedience or ongoing fidelity. So for those of you guys that believe getting a virgin woman, which is Andrew Wilson's thing, it doesn't guarantee shit, right? Without legal consequences. Now, I'm not saying that women should be 304s or whores. I'm just saying that this is a lot deeper to virginity. Now, virginity back in the Victorian era meant that this woman was suitable because you didn't have birth control, you didn't have DNA testing or any of that, right? So the only way to assure that your bloodline, that your children belong to you, is if this woman was a virgin and she wasn't touched by another man. But today's a lot different, right? Without legal consequences, the covenant can be broken at will, leaving one party vulnerable. Church limitations. Most churches today lack the authority to enforce compliance in civil matters. Can provide spiritual counsel, discipline, or moral pressure, but it cannot compel action outside its walls. Only very tightly controlled religious communities, small sects, can enforce ecclesiastical rules effectively. But then the solution does not scale to a broader society. It just sticks within that one community, which is what the Amish is, right? Practical consequences. Men entering an ecclesiastical-only marriage would risk the same problems they would avoid in a secular marriage. Deception by spouse, emotional rejection, financial vulnerability if the spouse has access to joint assets outside the church enforcement. Without state enforcement, men are entirely reliant on trust and the church's influence, which is often insufficient in the secular world. And men already don't trust the church as it is. Andrew Wilson's vision works in theory if both parties are highly devout and the church has strong authority. But in modern secular society, without the state, there is no real enforcement mechanism. Marriage becomes entirely voluntarily, and its stability depends on moral and emotional buy-in, not law. Scale and enforcement. In a small insular community like the Amish, social and religious norms are enforced through tight-knit structures. Everyone knows each other. Church authority is respected. Social shaming, excommunication, and communal pressures are powerful tools. This works because community is homogenous, devout, and mutually accountable, right? Again, that's a small community. Contrast with secular society. In large secular societies like the US or Western Europe, people come from diverse beliefs, values, and priorities. Most do not recognize the classical authority as binding. As I said earlier, you have Protestant, you have all different religious groups and sectors, and they don't all believe the same shit, right? Enforcement through moral or social pressures is extremely limited. Without the legal framework of the state, there's no effective mechanism to compel compliance, resolve the disputes, or protect assets and children, right? So that's the problem, right? How is the church going to protect all of this? Where's the law? You need the law to be backed by the state and enforced by the state. And I'm going to break down a lot of this shit today. Practical implications. For Wilson's classical only marriage system to function at scale, he would need a very devout, homogeneous population or his own church with sufficient authority to enforce compliance. Otherwise, in the secular world, most people would ignore the rules. Men would remain wary of committing, divorce, deception, and instability would remain likely outcomes. Summary. Wilson's plan could work only in community structured like the Amish, where religious authority and social enforcement are strong. In large secular societies, it's not scalable. Human nature, female autonomy, and secular legal realities make it nearly impossible to implement effectively. Marriage as a process, not just an institution. Here's where I get into this. Marriage as a process, not just an institution. Divorce is indeed a problem in modern society, but divorce doesn't exist in a vacuum. Every divorce starts with a marriage contract, so the entry point and decision to marry is critical. If men marry a woman who misrepresents themselves or hide critical aspects of their character, any marriage, even under strict ecclesiastical rules, can fail. Right? Entry point problem. Women or men can present themselves as ideal partners, but may misrepresent. Well, we're talking about men getting married to women, right? So I just put men or women there because both sides could be a thing, but this is specific to men. The idea is to get men married to women to invest into women. The women be in the marketplace. the men being the investor, right? So men can present, or women can present themselves as ideal partners, but may misrepresent sexual, emotional, or moral history, hide incompatibilities, pretend to align with religious or conventional values that don't actually follow. A lot of those conservative women, like what's her bitch name? Sadie Khan, was able to infiltrate a lot of you conservative white male management people and charge you bitch niggas, white male management niggas, crackers, Neanderthals, $8,000 for dating coach services. $8,000 for dating coach service. Sadie Khan, a side bitch, was teaching you white men how to talk to bitches and charging you $8,000. Anyway, if you don't screen, vet, or test the compatibility and honesty at the start, the risk of divorce or covenant failure remains high. Wilson focused on divorce as reactive. By saying the problem is divorce, Wilson is treating the symptom, not the cause. Divorce is the outcome of a mismatch or deception in the relationship, not the root cause itself. You can make divorce harder, a classical control, but if the entry point allows dishonesty, men are still vulnerable. Emotional manipulation, misrepresentation of values or past, attraction and compatibility mismatches, right? The correct approach. Any serious framework addressing divorce must start at the entry point. Screening for honesty, compatibility, and shared values. Evaluating alignment of long-term goals. Assessing genuine commitment, not just appearances. A classical rule applied after the fact don't prevent men from being deceived at the beginning. Andrew Wilson. Summary insight. Focusing on the divorce alone is like treating the broken leg instead of preventing the fall. In modern society, preventing misrepresentation and ensuring compatibility at the start is far more effective than relying on classical rules or divorce restrictions later. Andrew Wilson's classical marriage plan is unlikely to work in practice without addressing the messy reality of human behavior, female autonomy, and societal norms. Right? Layer 1, traditional male investment versus modern female expectation. Men are still expected to pursue, invest, and demonstrate effort in dating. Modern women influenced by feminist ideology and social dynamics often expect little or no reciprocity in emotional or material terms, which means that you cannot expect women to do anything in their dating. They're not expected to submit or contribute to the date of anything. They're just there to receive and not give anything back. Examples, a man takes a woman on a date. She is not expected to contribute or invest cooking, transportation, and emotional energy. In other words, if she knows I have to work hard, she won't even offer me a damn Metro card to go to work after I took her out on a date. She won't even cook something. She won't even say, yo, you took me on a date. Let me drive you to work today, this morning. Women are not doing that. Men are penalized socially if they don't pursue, while women face minimal consequences or lack of reciprocity. This creates a structural imbalance where men are expected to give and women are largely shielded from accountability. Layer 2, sexual and emotional power dynamics. Women exercise selective attraction. So how a man communicates matters less than whether she wants him to communicate that way, right? How a man communicates matters less than whether she wants him to communicate that way. Meaning it's not how the man communicates, like how he approaches her, it's who she wants to communicate to her, who she's attracted. I'm going to break it down, right? Respectful non-sexual approaches can be perceived as suckers. Good guys who will tolerate manipulation or disrespect miss opportunities because modern women prioritize what they want emotionally and sexually, not fairness or mutual effort, right? So that's the big problem. The result, men who behave traditionally or respectfully can be exploited or undervalued while women retain social and sexual leverage. I'm going to break this down, this language now. So stay tuned with it. Lack of accountability in the initial stages. Many women in secular dating spaces misrepresent themselves on apps and social media, operate from 3 or 4 mentality, past sexual history, promiscuity, and manipulative behavior. Monetized attention, shout out to Coach Greg Adams because he talks about the monetized marketplace, right? Or sexual labor without moral or social consequences, example, OnlyFans and Instagram. Men, by contrast, face social punishment if they misrepresent or fail to meet expectations. Without addressing this entry point imbalance, any marriage framework, ecclesiastical or secular, fails before it begins because men are constantly vulnerable to deception and manipulation. Critical implications for Wilson's framework. Wilson's plan seems to assume that men and women will enter marriage with honesty, virtue, and commitment. Ecclesiastical rules alone are sufficient to enforce fidelity and respect. Hold on, what? Wilson's plan seems to assume, okay, my bad. Men and women will enter marriage with honesty, virtue, and commitment. Ecclesiastical rules alone are sufficient to enforce fidelity and respect. Reality, secular women or women operating outside of strict religious norms aren't bound by church authority. Virginity, religiously, chastity, or covenant rules do not guarantee accountability, attraction, or mutual respect. Without addressing the imbalances and deceptions in dating itself, ecclesiastical marriage cannot effectively prevent divorce or dysfunction. I bet all the people that fucked Andrew Wilson, after I've broken this down intelligently, presented this, they're all going to hate me in the comment section. The modern dating world is multi-layered with structural advantages for women in initial interactions, sexual and emotional leverage, and minimal accountability. Wilson's framework skips all these layers, assuming moral authority and covenant enforcement are sufficient. Yet in the secular society, they are woefully insufficient. Right? The lived reality of modern male-female dynamics in the dating world, right? When you look at women's selective attraction, it's wild. If a man approaches a woman in public space, at the gym, coffee shop, or whatever, so this is I like to write my own scripts and shit. So, right? Whether on a sexual type of vibe or whether he's direct or flirty, the way she responds is all based on whether she's attracted to him. If she's not attracted, forget a polite no thank you. She'll disrespect him. Maybe pull out her phone and record him, make him embarrassed in front of everybody. If he just said one thing and walked away. Now flip it. The guy she's actually attracted to, if he becomes at her the same way, she's going to open up immediately, respond instantly, react positively. That's how selective attraction works. But here's the kicker. The guys who do the respectful society approved thing, the ones who approach her politely, non-sexually, like they're supposed to, those are the ones the women see as the good guy. And what does that mean in practice? That means she feels like she can manipulate him, take advantage of him, disrespect him, and get resources from him, all without giving anything back. He's in the friend zone before he even knows it, just by being the good guy. This dynamic, male investment versus female expectation, attraction versus selective compliance is happening right at the initial stages. Before a relationship even forms, it's not just dating mechanics, it's what shapes who enters relationships, who gets married, and how the power dynamics are already skewed. If you don't account for this, Andrew Wilson's ecclesiastical framework misses the reality of the entry point. Women's selective attraction, the good guy exploitation, the imbalance in investment and reciprocity. That's the ground floor. If you don't get that right, no covenant, no church rule, or more authority is going to fix it. Once you're at the marriage stage, this is important, Andrew Wilson. This is what you're not accounting for. The marriage, even before the marriage, the dating, the vetting, all of that shit is more important than the marriage. Or I should say, it's the foundation to the marriage. Then the marriage is foundation to the relationship. Right? If how men and women are approaching each other on the dating and vetting stage is not fair and balanced, by the time they get to that relationship, girlfriend, boyfriend stage, well, I should say, it's the dating and vetting first, then it's the girlfriend-boyfriend relationship next, then it's the marriage. If at the dating stage, shit is imbalanced and unfair, and this is how women are looking at the men, right? Or taking advantage of men, by the time you get to the relationship, it's going to fail. And if you fuck around and get married now, then it's going to be a divorce. This is what we have to address. Male investment versus female expectation, right? Right. So now let's look at this, right? Men are still expected to pursue invest. I already said that. Modern women, especially in secular one spaces, expect little to no reciprocity. A man takes a woman on a date. She may not contribute, invest, or give anything in return. And I'm not even talking about sex or energy or attention or like, right? I'm not even talking about sex. Take sex out of it. Just investing something. Maybe a MetroCard, maybe cook, maybe engage in a conversation. You know what I'm saying? Be of value to why he should be investing in you. Because if every time I have to invest money into you and I have to so-called chase you, I'm losing my money by chasing you because you're not giving me a return on my investment. You're running away with my investment. Men are socially penalized if they don't pursue, while women face minimal consequences for lack of investment. Result: men carry the burden of investment while women retain the leverage without accountability. Attraction versus selective compliance. Women's responses are heavily dictated by selective attraction. So I think I already broke this down, but I could pause and read this already. All right. So this is the issue. It's not the marriage, it's not the divorce, it's the dating stage. It's the girlfriend stage, and then it's by the time you get to the marriage. So let me read this. Marriage frameworks. Ecclesiastical only frameworks like Andrew Wilson proposes assume honesty, virtue, and compliance from the start. In reality, male investment is already exploited. Female selective attraction dictates response. Lack of accountability at the entry point undermines any covenant. Without addressing these initial stages, divorce prevention, and marital stability frameworks are solving the wrong problem. All right, y'all can pause these and y'all can, look through them yourself. Yeah, I broke this shit down. I have ADHD, so I have to put down what I'm saying in thoughts down for me to remember what I said. And at the same time, what I break down is fucking impressive to me. Because at the time, when I'm breaking it down, I'm in a different space. Like I'm in a different, ADHD puts you into an ultra-focused space of intellectual thought. And if you don't write it down, you're going to miss it. So I have to write it down so I don't miss it. You feel me? Summarized thesis. The modern dating landscape is layered with systematic imbalances. Men are expected to invest and pursue. Women exercise selective attraction, and initial accountability is virtually non-existent. These dynamics precede marriage and shape relationships long before vows are exchanged. Any ecclesiastical or covenant-based approach that ignores these realities assumes assuming virtue, compliance, and moral authority are sufficient, fails to address the true structural problem, the skewed power dynamics, and the lack of accountability in the initial stages of dating and courtship. The mechanics of law, authority, and morality, and how the Victorian age relied on both force and social enforcement. Let's unpack it carefully, right? Difference between enforce and enforce. Enforce, verb, the action of compelling someone to obey law, rule, or standard. This is important to Andrew Wilson and what he's trying to do, right? Example, the government enforces traffic laws by issuing fines. Enforce, adjective, verb in past tense, indicates that law, rule, or expectation has been made, obeyed, or complied. Example, in the Victorian era, social codes were strictly enforced by both law and customs. In short, enforce equals the act of applying authority to make something happen. Enforce the state of having been made to comply. How are you going to make the women made to comply, and how are you going to enforce things on the women? Right? And you're going to need the state to back that. And I'm going to break that down too. In the Victorian society, both legal and social codes were actively enforced. Men and women had clear consequences if they broke rules, often involving social shaming, legal penalties, or family community pressure, which is what Andrew Wilson is proposing, right? And that's not going to work with the modern woman today. Enforcing something in the Victorian age, laws and social norms are tightly coupled. Adultery, premarital sex, and female chastity are backed by both law and societal consequences. Law that's by the state. A man could sue for breach of contract, claim damages, or seek social legal remedies if a woman misrepresented herself. Communities and churches apply, which we're not doing that today. That second part, where's the law that says you can do that today? Show me it, right? Communities and churches, I think if you did this, this might work, but guess what, Andrew? The state has to pass it, and I'm going to show you why. Communities and churches apply social enforcement, shaming, ostracism, or pressure to comply with norms. Enforcement relied on state authority, legal systems, community authority, social pressure, church. So you can't have one without the other. You can't have state or church without each other, because state is the legal system. Church is the moral system. So you can't have either one without the other, right? People had limited autonomy. You couldn't easily ignore laws or social codes without tangible consequences. How could you even do this from an ecclesiastical or biblical perspective? Without state involvement, law enforcement may rely on spiritual and moral church authority. Possible mechanics: church discipline, excommunication, denying sacraments, public moral accountability. What modern woman gives a fuck about that? Community enforcement: public shaming, social exclusion, oppression, comply. That don't work. Women just go on Instagram and twerk even more. Covenant contracts: premarital arrangements witnessed by church authorities, possibly with spiritual consequences if broken. What are those consequences? And like Coach Greg Adams says, you could go to a divorce lawyer and she could take that premarital arrangement and go fuck it up and take you to the state. Limitations: these mechanics only work for those who believe in church authority. Secular individuals or women who reject church norms are immune to ecclesiastical enforcement. There's no secular legal backup, so material or emotional harm like divorce or misrepresentation cannot be remedied. So that's the problem. This is what Coach Greg Adams was saying. It only works for the people that believe in church authority. What if you no longer believe in that anymore? Right? And people change their religions like breathing air. Victorian enforcement was state plus society plus religion working together, Andrew Wilson, which made rules effective. In a modern ecclesiastical model only, enforcement must be entirely moral spiritual, which is voluntary, not coercive. So if it's not coercive, how do you enforce that? Because you might try to enforce something and somebody might voluntarily say, fuck that, and leave. It's nearly impossible to achieve the same compliance, especially in a secular society. Summary insight: enforce means compliance has been achieved. Enforce is the act of compelling to it. Victorian society relied on both legal and societal enforcement to compel behavior. Trying to replicate that today with only biblical ecclesiastical authority faces a massive gap. Without secular enforcement, compliance depends entirely on personal belief and voluntary obedience. Force: a physical power, coercion, and what did I say? Compulsion applied to make something happen. Example: the police use force to break up the fight. As a verb, to force someone is to compel them to directly or often against their will, usually implying physical, psychological, and situational pressure. Example: he forced the door open. Key idea: force implies direct compulsion, often bypassing voluntary choice. How are you going to do that? Under Andrew Wilson's system, right? Many Victorian rules were enforced without physical force. Social shaming, ostracism, or legal action worked to compel compliance. Force existed too: police, legal threats, family pressure, but often the power of enforcement was enough to get people to comply without needing physical coercion. All right. Now, this is where I challenge CGA, or Coach Greg Adams, right? Taking the structural lessons from the past without the barbarity. Tommy Sotomayor would tell me English has been kicking my ass this entire presentation, and applying them to modern dating and accountability. One, the cherry picking thing that Coach says. People often dismiss traditional structures by highlighting historical atrocities. Heads chopped off in early Christianity, brutality in Roman times, strict Victorian punishment. They call it cherry picking, suggesting you're ignoring the full context of the past. My point: evolution is not cherry picking; it's learning from the past, taking what works, discarding what's harmful, and adjusting it to modern realities, right? Applying Victorian rules to modern dating. The core principle of Victorian era structure: accountability, boundaries, and consequences. Today, you can adapt this without physical punishment. Male boundaries: Men set expectations about how they are approached, courted, and treated. Female boundaries. Women decide what they're willing to reciprocate and align with, but must honor their commitments and honesty. In other words, so women, if you go on a date and you just decide to reciprocate disrespect, the man has an option to no longer date you. Fellas, if you want to go to McDonald's and that woman doesn't want to follow you or reciprocate, she has the right not to. Right? Accountability. If a woman manipulates, misrepresents, or exploits a man during dating, there should be a system of consequences. Now, the reason why I haven't said that to accountability for men, because there's already accountability to men, for men when we lie to women, cheat on women, or whatever to women. There's already punishment and consequences for us. So I don't have to make that example for men or create something for men. Right? Consequences don't need to be barbaric. They can be social shaming, public knowledge of manipulative behavior, dating credit score. This is just something. A reputation metric for honesty and alignment in relationships. Reform period, a way to restore reputation by providing responsible, respectful dating behavior. The key is transparency and feedback loops, so men can make informed decisions rather than expect being exploited unknowingly, right? So example now, if a woman has been consistently cheating on dudes, lying about who she was on a date, you take on a date somewhere, she's now trying to manipulate your money, lying to you, that can reflect her dating score, right? So you probably could show up on some dating website somewhere or whatever. And what the man can do is, like, based upon this woman's dating score, he can make a decision whether to date her or leave her alone, right? It's like a restaurant. If it has a B rating on a restaurant, you can say, I'm not going to eat there. Or you can choose to eat there and get your stomach sick. Today, the entry point, if dating is where most manipulation occurs, men who follow respectful socially approved approaches or exploit about women without consequences. A modern accountability system inspired by Victorian structure preserves autonomy and choice, protects men from being taken advantage of, provides women with incentives to act responsible without resorting to physical or archaic punishments, right? You can take the structure of the past, disregard the barbarity, and modernize it. Boundaries for men and women, clear expectations, transparent accountability for exploitative behavior. The end goal, a dating ecosystem where respect, honesty, and mutual investment are enforced socially and reputationally, not violently, giving both parties clarity and fairness, right? Modernized framework for dating boundaries and accountability, right? Yeah, I'm breaking it down. Sovereign choice. Men decide how they want to operate in dating. Courtship or casual relationship or fucking. Can choose the type of date. Pizza Hut, McDonald's, upscale dinner, or casual meetups. Can set the tone, rules, and expectation of the interaction. Men may define how a woman should behave. Respect him, follow his directives during dating, contribute fairly to the relationship, emotional, practical, and otherwise. Right to enforce boundaries. If a woman does not align with the terms of the courtship or relationship, he can walk away, remove himself from the situation, decide whether to continue vetting her for a potential relationship, right? Female boundaries. Women can choose whether to accept the male's term, can agree to the relationship, dating style, or boundaries he sets, can also leave at any time. Obligation if accepting, honor commitments and honesty during dating, align her behavior with the terms established, reciprocate effort and energy fairly. Agency preserved. She can leave if she does not agree, but once committed, she must honor her agreement. And then with the social credit score I talked about, when she doesn't honor that agreement fairly, that reflects her credit score. It tanks her credit score or whatever. The only time when it doesn't tank her credit score is she says, yeah, I just don't want to be here anymore. Now she's honestly telling you she doesn't want to leave. She just doesn't want to be there. Right? So that doesn't affect the credit score because, right, you don't want to punish women for not wanting to be somewhere where they don't want to be. Right? The only time it affects her social credit score is if, so I might have to modify that a little bit. It's if she's cheating on you, taking advantage of you, manipulating you, or lying about who she is, right? If she manipulates, misrepresents, or exploits a man during dating, there should be a consequence, potentially a dating social credit system. Consequences can include public transparency, reputational scoring, or reform programs. She can repair her score by demonstrating accountability, honesty, and respectful behavior. For men already face social and reputational accountability for misbehavior. Protecting themselves with boundaries, vetting, and respectful approaches mitigates risk, right? I bet you Andrew Wilson ain't come up with this. Respectful approaches. If a man is respectful and the woman rejects him, he walks away, no harassment, no escalation. If a woman publicly shames or embarrasses him in this context, she should face reputational consequences. Dating social credit. Functions like a restaurant or a building rating. Provides men with informed decisions about potential partners. Helps men to avoid hot stove scenarios, preventing repeated exploitation. Innovation. The system keeps the core Victorian principle of accountability and structure, removes barbaric and archaic punishments, applies rules in the modern, digital, and social context. Core principle. Men retain sovereignty and protective boundaries. Women retain agency but must honor agreements and be accountable. Consequence exists for manipulative or exploitative behavior. Social credit or reputational system provides transparency. Outcome. Dating and vetting becomes safer, clearer, and more predictable, while still respecting autonomy. Now, in other words, women, you could be a 3 or 4 if you want to. But guess what? If you lie about being a 3 or 4, and you know that this man, he's saying he's expecting a traditional woman, and you lie to that guy, he can dismiss you from that relationship, and you don't get nothing. And it tanks your social credit score and your reputation. Now, if you told him the truth that you was a 3 or 4, and he still accepts you, that's not your fault. That's his fault, right? The reason why I'm doing this is I understand that the environment or the dating marketplace has 3 or 4s. I understand that there's men out there that love to date 3 or 4s. I want a space where people can date their ecosystem, right? A 3 or 4 shouldn't be jumping out of her damn lane to go date a traditional nigga. Stick to dating the niggas that like 3 or 4s. And a traditional nigga should be able to find a woman who's also traditional, dating his ecosystem, right? By modernizing Victorian era accountability and boundary rules, we can create a dating framework that respects male sovereignty, preserve female agency, and enforce consequences for manipulation or dishonesty. A modern social credit system or reputational framework allows men to make informed choices while holding women accountable, creating a structure for healthy dating and courtship without reverting to archaic punishment. Right? Marriage as a separate stage from dating. Distinguish dating versus marriage. Dating/vetting phase. Men and women set boundaries and expectations. Accountability exists primarily for honesty and alignment. Misrepresentation and exploitation can be mitigated via reputational systems for social credit. Marriage phase. Entering the marriage is deeper, legally binding commitment. Women and men are held to heavier accountability standards because the relationship carries formal obligations, right? See, now, men, we understand that, but women don't understand that. And the reason why they don't understand that is because they can walk out of their heavy obligation, and still the man gets punished for that. All right. Accountability for women in marriage. If a woman cheats while in a committed relationship, girlfriend or married, especially if it leads to pregnancy, the man should have the legal right to sue or claim damages. Now, might need to modify that for girlfriend. Like if the bitch cheated on you in the girlfriend stage, you can just dismiss her and kick her out of your space. Now, it depends if she gets pregnant. And if she got pregnant and she blamed the baby on you, come to find out it's a next nigga baby and you've been paying for that baby, you can sue her and that nigga, right? This is because she violated the covenant and caused tangible consequences, emotional, financial, and familiar, right? Or family. Sexual withdrawal. If the woman stops having sex with her husband for an extended period, he should be able to divorce her without penalty. No-fault divorce laws should not allow her to claim half his assets simply for walking out, right? Inheritance asset rules. She only gets property or financial claims in the case of widowhood, not for leaving or violating the marital contract. Now, I had to amend that womanhood, that widowhood thing. I'm going to amend it. I got you. Proposed legal adjustments, anti-cheating protections, Laws should recognize cheating with financial or familiar consequences as actionable against violator. Men can seek legal redress if a woman has a child outside the marriage or damages the marital agreement, right? Contractual clarity. Marriage contracts should clearly define sexual obligations and consequences for violation, limits on property claims in case of divorce, remedies for breach of fidelity, right? Core principle. Marriage is a higher level of accountability than dating. Men's rights and protection must increase proportionally to the woman's commitment. Women cannot exploit legal loopholes like no-fault divorce to escape accountability while leaving men financially, emotionally damaged. Legal systems should reflect the mutual obligation of fidelity, honesty, and commitment, protecting men from exploitation. Thesis statement. Marriage should be treated as a binding covenant with clear, enforceable account. But guess what, Andrew? You're going to need the state to back my law that I'm proposing. All right. Marriage should be treated as a binding covenant with clear, enforceable accountability for women. Cheating, withdrawal of intimacy, or children born outside the marriage should carry legal consequences. No default divorce laws that punish men for women's breaches should be reformed, limiting her claims to inheritance only in cases of widowhood, not violation of vows. This restores fairness and incentives honesty, fidelity, and mutual respect in marriage, right? So this is me making amendments to that widowhood to protect something. If a spouse unlawfully causes the death of their partner, murder, voluntary manslaughter, or criminal negligent homicide, the perpetrator must not gain any civil, financial, or inheritance benefit from that debt and must face criminal punishments and civil liability, which you're going to need to state, in proportion to the offense. Criminal consequences suspected, right? So criminal consequences. Suspected homicide is handled by criminal investigators and prosecutors under normal criminal law. On conviction of murder or manslaughter, the perpetrator faces criminal penalties, imprisonments, fines, according to existing criminal statutes, with aggravating factors. Predetermined, financial motive, increase in penalties, right? Premeditation, my bad. Financial motive and increase in penalties. Conviction must be reached via ordinary criminal due process. Police for investigation, indictment, trial, rules of evidence, right to counsel. Civil and financial consequences, no benefit rule, right? A convicted spouse forfeits any legal claims to the deceased estate. Inheritance, marital property rights. So the state gonna be involved. Survival benefits and life insurance proceeds tied to the descendant's debt. This mirrors the common law slayer rule concept. You don't profit from your own crime. If a conviction is not obtained, but credible civil evidence shows wrongful conduct, example, clear civil court preponderance of evidence, civil remedies can include forfeiture of claims and monetary damages against the perpetrator, the perp, right? Any forfeited assets can be used first to satisfy a restitution to descendants, dependents, children, right? Protection against abuse of the rule, right? So this is like I'm a balanced individual. So like people cannot abuse that law. So you got to put things in law that prevent the abuse of the law, right? Presumptions of innocence, no punitive civil forfeiture or criminal punishment without due process. Independent review to prevent collusion or false claims. An independent prosecutor or special counsel should review suspicious debts, evolving financial benefit. Appeals and remedy. Convicted persons retain normal appellate rights. Wrongful convictions must create paths to reinstatement of civil rights claims where appropriate. Family protection and emergency response. Where there is credible threat of harm, domestic violence threats, the victim or family should have access to emergency restraining orders and criminal protection measures. Rapid reporting procedures to police intervene before homicide occurs. The law should prioritize prevention, domestic violence enforcement, as well as punishment, right? Right? So, and that's neutral, right? But that's to protect the men too, right? I should make that. I should put distinct language in there, like this is to protect both men and women from domestic abuse, right? Practical mechanics for the marriage framework, right? So I might have to amend this, right? Contract optional, right? So now with this one, you can put optional things in there, But if you don't agree to it, you don't have to get married, right? So this could be a way to I guess, gauge the whatsoever, right? Gauge the how well the woman attracts you, and if she's trying to she's trying to what you call, he's trying to scam you or something, right? But I might have to amend this right here. No automatic inheritance or suspicious debt, right? Prohibit courts must review sudden spousal benefit claims if debt circumstances are suspicious. Automatic distribution is paused until review completes. Transparency or an education. Publicize the no benefit rule so potential perps understand they cannot profit from homicide. A spouse who unlawfully causes their partner's debt must be criminally prosecuted, imprisoned if convicted, and barred from profiting from the crime. Civil asset forfeiture and restitution mechanism should ensure victims' families are protected, while due process safeguards guard against misuse, right? So this is the purpose of the independent review, right? False accusation include, for example. So y'all can pause this and y'all can read this yourself, right? Okay. Authority and enforcement. State-backed marriage. The government enforces contracts and consequences. Courts, police, and civil law provide mechanisms for divorce, property division, child custody, criminal consequences like fraud, abuse, or spousal misconduct. Church-backed marriage. Ecclesiastical, right? The church can define vows, moral obligations, and spiritual consequences, but it cannot enforce civil penalties or property claims outside its own organization. Enforcement relies on religious authority, community shaman, or spiritual sanction. Practical limitations. In a secular society, most people don't recognize ecclesiastical authority as legally binding. Women or men can ignore church rules without legal repercussions. Any property, inheritance, or civil accountability requires the state. To fully enforce your Victorian modernized framework, social credit accountability, no-fault divorce reform, spouse liability, widowhood protections, you need state legal backing. So this is me critiquing my own shit, because I understand I'm going to need state legal backing for that, because the church doesn't supersede the law of the land, and I'm going to go into that. The church, the hybrid approach, the church sets the moral and ethical rules, vows, fidelity, expectations, sexual ethics. State enforces legal consequences, assists division, divorce, liability, criminal penalties, right? The church could certify marriage, mediate disputes spiritually, publish reputational or social credit guidance like dating score. But if a woman cheats or violates marital vows legally, only the state can adjudicate financial, criminal, or civil consequences, right? Bottom line, ecclesiastical marriage alone cannot replace state enforcement in secular society. Wilson's idea works only for moral spiritual enforcement, not civil or legal enforcement. To achieve your framework of fidelity, accountability, property protection, divorce reform, widowhood liability, you would have to involve the state or a state-backed legal mechanism. A church can set rules and moral consequences, but without state backing, it cannot enforce legal or financial accountability. So Wilson's ecclesiastical model could guide behavior spiritually, but for actual enforcement of Victorian modernized protections, I am describing state law is required. Now, this is Andrew Wilson's approach, right? He misses the nuance of state authority in a constitutional republic like the U.S. So this is the thing that he misses with the state shit, right? It depends on what country you're in. If the U.S. government is a constitutional republic, it's going to be different from a state being backed by a constitutional monarchy like UK or Australia, or maybe Canada, right? Constitutional republic context. United States is a constitutional republic. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. All states' laws must comply with the federal Constitution. The state exists to protect the individual civil liberties and the rights of the people, not to operate independently or arbitrarily, right? So that's what Andrew Wilson is missing. Separation of powers, executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch. Quick clarification. The legislative branch writes the law, and the judicial branch interprets it when disputes or questions arise. The executive branch enforces it, right? So I'll put that there because there's a separation of states. Everything is not consolidated into one bureaucracy. It's separated, right? And the founding fathers did that on purpose. Limits on state authority. The state cannot simply enforce personal religious moral framework. It must operate under constitutional protections. Free speech, due process, and equal protection limit arbitrary enforcement. The state cannot enforce church rules or private social codes unless codified in law. This is why a church-based system cannot replace civil law. Church authority has no legal power unless the state voluntarily codifies it. So you can't have a church without the state, because the state itself it bows down to the federal law of the land, and the church bows down to the state, right? Implication for Andrew Wilson. His idea of ecclesiastical marriage assumes authority the church doesn't have in a secular republic. Any legal enforcement he imagines, property claims, divorce, accountability, requires state sanction under constitutional limits. The state cannot enforce moral authority for the sake of tradition unless it's codified in law without violating civil liberties. That's the problem he's going to face, right? Mutual dependence of state and people. State authority is not absolute. In a constitutional republic, the state exists because of the people, not above them. Elected officials, mayors, governors, legislators are accountable to the voters. The people can remove them via election, impeachment, or recall process. People's rights are protected by the state. Constitutional rights, due process, free speech, property, self-defense, Second Amendment exist because the state guarantees them and enforces them. Without the state's enforcement of law, rights are merely theoretical. In short, the state cannot act independently of the people, and the people cannot fully exercise their rights without the state enforcing them. So you need the state. Checks and balances against rogue governance. If the state attempts to go rogue or overreach, citizens can lobby, protest, or petition for legislative change. Citizens can vote out officials or pressure the judicial branch to interpret laws constitutionally. Constitutional provisions like the Second Amendment exist as a last resort protection against tyranny. Application to marriage and male accountability. People who want better marriage laws or legal protections for men can petition legislators at city, state, or federal levels. Lobby for reforms around no-fault divorce, fidelity accountability, spousal support property, and asset protection, widowhood inheritance rules. So now guess what? Y'all going to have an issue because women in these states like New York or California are a big population and they're largely liberal. So that's the issue you're going to have in these states. And any reform must operate within constitutional limits. Laws cannot violate women's civil rights, but can redefine contracts, obligations, and remedies in marriage. All right. Key nuance. Andrew Wilson misses. He assumes a church or more authority can replace or bypass state law. In reality, state is required to enforce legal accountability. The people are required to demand and maintain those protections. Without both working together, ecclesiastical rules alone are symbolic. They cannot carry civil or financial consequences. Summary. In a constitutional republic like the U.S., the state and the people exist in mutual dependence. Legal protections for men in marriage or any reforms require state enforcement, but the state itself is accountable to the people. Ecclesiastical models without state backing cannot enforce real consequences. The true change comes from people lobbying and reforming state law within constitutional limits. Whew. Now watch this. After I have broken this down, there should be no conservative from Andrew Wilson's side that disagree with the last part that I wrote down, because it's all about the Constitution and law and what if you study any civil government. Because I remember civic class in high school and elementary. That's how it's broken down. So you can't argue that because it's not coming from me. It's the facts of how the governments operate. But we'll see. Anyway, this is Kish Yardy Nation Gaming or Kish Yardy Views and Vlogs. Remember to like, share, and subscribe.